What if I told you that the way green card sponsorship worked in 1975 could completely change how you see U.S. immigration today? Most people think the green card process we have now is just a product of modern politics. But the truth is, the roots go back decades. And 1975 was one of the most important, yet least talked about, years in this history. In fact, what happened that year still shapes immigration policy. The wait times for visas, and even political debates we hear in Congress right now. Stick with me until the end, because once you understand the 1975 reality, you'll see the entire U.S. immigration system in a new light. To understand 1975, we first need to rewind a decade to 1965. This was the year the Immigration and Nationality Act was signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. It was a huge turning point. Before 1965, U.S. immigration was controlled by something called the National Origins Quota System. This system gave more visas to certain European countries and severely limited immigration from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But the 1965 law threw out that quota system and replaced it with something totally new, a family-based preference system. This meant that your family connections or skills mattered more than your country of birth. The idea was simple: keep families together and allow more skilled workers to enter. Lawmakers expected this to make immigration more fair and balanced, but they underestimated one big thing: how much this would change America's immigrant population. Suddenly, people from countries that had been heavily restricted before could now come if they had family or job offers. By the early 1970s, new immigrant communities were growing fast in cities across America. And by the time we reached 1975, the new system was running at full speed. But it was already starting to show some serious cracks. So, what did green card sponsorship look like in 1975? First of all, there was nothing digital about the process. No online forms, no case status trackers, no automated emails. Everything was done on paper. You had to mail your application and then wait for letters to come back. The main way to get a green card was through family sponsorship. Immediate relatives of U.S. citizens, meaning spouses, unmarried children under 21, and parents, had no limit on visas. That meant if you qualified, you could get processed without waiting for a quota. But for everyone else in the family preference categories, there were strict numerical limits. These categories included adult children, married children, and brothers or sisters of U.S. citizens, plus spouses and children of green card holders. Once those annual numbers were filled, you had to wait. And sometimes that wait could stretch into years. Employment-based green cards existed in 1975, but they were a lot less common. The labor certification process was slow and very bureaucratic. You had to prove there were no qualified U.S. workers for the job you were offering to an immigrant, and that often involved multiple layers of approval and paperwork. In 1975, public opinion on immigration was mixed. On one hand, the media often told stories about family reunifications, emotional tales of parents seeing their children after years apart. On the other hand, some political voices were starting to express concern over chain migration, a term that was just starting to appear in policy discussions. This was the idea that one immigrant could sponsor a family member, and that family member could later sponsor more relatives, creating a never-ending cycle. Supporters argued that family unity was a core American value. Critics worried it would lead to uncontrolled population growth. Let's bring this to life with an example. Imagine you were a U.S. citizen in 1975 trying to sponsor your sister from the Philippines. You'd fill out your petition, send it by mail, and then wait and wait. Sometimes you'd get a letter saying your case was still pending because the quota for your category was full. Or imagine you were a green card holder from Mexico sponsoring your spouse. Your wait might be shorter than others, but it could still take many months, and missing just one document could set you back further. Everything depended on the pace of the immigration office handling your case, and communication was much slower than today. By 1975, the cracks in the system were becoming clear. The family preference system had been running for 10 years, and demand was much higher than lawmakers had predicted. Backlogs started appearing, especially for countries with large immigrant communities in the U.S. This is when the idea of chain migration began to dominate the conversation. One person arriving could eventually lead to several more family members coming over. Some politicians saw this as a threat, while others saw it as the heart of America's melting pot. For the immigrants who arrived in 1975, starting a new life in the U.S. came with both opportunities and struggles. Housing was one of the first challenges. Many families lived together under one roof until they could afford their own place. Ethnic neighborhoods grew rapidly, like Chinatown in San Francisco, Little Saigon in California, or Little Italy in New York. Employment was another challenge. Even highly skilled immigrants often had to take jobs that didn't match their qualifications because their foreign credentials weren't recognized. Community support often came from religious institutions or small nonprofit organizations that worked to help new arrivals adapt. When we compare 1975 to today, the similarities are striking. The same family preference categories still exist. Immediate relatives still have no cap, while others face years-long waits. But now, the backlogs are even worse. In some cases, people wait more than a decade for their turn. And the same political debates about chain migration, merit-based immigration, and family unity continue. It's like the arguments from 1975 never really went away. They just got louder. Why does 1975 matter so much? Because it was the first time we saw the full impact of the 1965 law. It was when family-based immigration became the dominant force in America's immigration system. The problems we see today, like long waits and heated political debates, have their roots in this era. If we want to reform immigration, we have to understand where these challenges came from. And that means looking closely at 1975. Here's the thing. The green card sponsorship process in 1975 was slower, more manual, and in some ways more personal than today. You might get an actual letter from an immigration officer. You might have to physically go to the office to submit papers, but even then, the core issues we face today, like how many family members should be allowed, how to balance family unity with labor needs, and how to manage demand, were already part of the conversation. The lesson from 1975 is clear. Immigration systems evolve, but the debates stay the same. Backlogs, fairness, and the balance between family and work visas will always be part of the discussion. Understanding the past gives us a clearer picture of how to move forward. So the next time you hear someone arguing about green cards or immigration reform, remember that these aren't new issues. We've been debating them for nearly 50 years. And if history is any guide, the solutions we choose now will shape the immigration system for decades to come. If you found this video eye-opening, make sure you hit that like button so more people can discover this untold history of U.S. immigration. Share it with someone who thinks the green card process is only about today's politics. They might be surprised at how much of it was already decided decades ago. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. In my next video, I'll be breaking down how today's immigration laws could change over the next 5 years. And trust me, you don't want to miss it.